They say black ice doesn't warn you, it just waits. 1 second you're cruising under moonlight. The next your rig's sliding sideways into nothing but white fog. Tonight, you'll hear 10 true trucker horror stories from the frozen highways of America. Tales of voices on dead CB channels, headlights that vanish mid-bridge, and truckers who never called back. If you love real, grounded horror, hit that subscribe button now. Most of you watch these stories without subscribing, but this time don't risk it. Because once the road turns to glass, there's no stopping what's waiting out there. I run nights because the air is cleaner and the roads tell you the truth when everyone else is asleep. That week I was dragging a full 53's reefer out of Laredo, palletized romaine and berries headed for a DC outside Albuquerque. I run a 2016 Pete 579, ISX humming steady, 10-speed manual because I don't trust auto shifts on canyon grades. Gross was right under 79th and 200. My route was simple, US 277 up to Del Rio, then US 90 west through Comstock, across the Pecos High Bridge onto Marathon and north. Weather? Clear after a coastal storm, temperature dropping fast, the kind of night where your windshield fogs if you breathe wrong. Timestamp on my ELD when I rolled past Del Rio, a 1:37. Fuel tanks half, coffee acidic and old, hands smelling like diesel and sanitizer. CB on 19, mostly static and a preacher complaining about speed traps 200 miles away. I've crossed that Pecos Bridge a dozen times. It's a ribcage of steel thrown across a black cut in the earth. The drop is the kind that makes you sit straighter even at 2 in the morning. The road leading in is honest. No billboards, just scrub limestone and the long hum of your tires. If you run it at night, you know the wind changes right before the span. You can feel it tug the trailer once, twice, and then you're through it. Just past Comstock, something was off. The mile marker I expected, 286, wasn't lit by my beams when it should have been. Not missing exactly, just not there. My Garmin pinged and redrew the route with a little yellow triangle. Construction ahead. Detour via Ranch Ard 2083. I knew that road didn't feed anything big. Still, I backed out of the throttle, dropped from 10th to 9th, and watched for signs. Headlights fell across a temporary orange diamond. Bridge work 12 mi detour. The arrow was so clean it might have been painted that afternoon. CB, dead air. I keyed anyway. Westbound 90, any of y'all confirm Pecos is down tonight? Nothing but the thin insect buzz of bad skip. Another sign turned up like it had been waiting in the dark. Commercial traffic use detour. Reflective barrels lined the shoulder. Neat and fresh, their cuffs still white, no dust. I told myself Del Rio crews were efficient. That TX dot didn't play games out here and eased right. Ranch Road 2083 was a narrow 2-lane that cut south and then west. The kind of blacktop that knits ranch gates together. I could smell creosote from the posts and wet chalk from the ditch. The reefer compressor kicked on and thumped the cab with its low, familiar heartbeat. The farther I went, the thicker the night felt. Not fog, no visible mist, but the kind of darkness that eats spillover light. My high beams reached maybe a truck length and then died like they were embarrassed. I hugged center, hands at 10 and 2, fingers feeling the vibration of the wheel like reading Braille. Head another sign. Temporary river crossing ahead 20 tons. My stomach went tight. I was pushing 40 plus, no choice and no shoulder. I ran the math. Could I back a mile of ranch road in the dark, blind curves, trailer tandems itching? Not cleanly. Tow service would laugh at me until Monday. I rolled forward in 7th, tack humming at 1350, and the road dipped as if someone had pushed a thumb into the land. I saw the water before I heard it. A black strip that didn't reflect my headlights but drank them. The crossing rose out of that black like a skeleton. It wasn't a modern concrete job. It was a truss bridge, single lane, the kind you see in black and white photos with Model A's posed for scale. Riveted members, lattice guardrails, and this detail cut through me. Wooden decking, planks. The signs at the mouth were crisp. 1 lane. Trucks proceed slowly. A lantern glowed at the far end, warm and gold, swaying a little like somebody's hand was tired. Behind it, the world fell away into deeper night. I stopped short, set the trailer brakes with a hiss, and rolled my window. The air that came in smelled like river bottom, mud and something old threaded with the sweet tar of creosote. The wind did that Pecos trick, tugged once, twice. I listened. A dog barking somewhere far off, a night bird, the pinging of hot metal cooling. No water noise. That felt wrong. Okay, I told the wheel like it was a partner and eased back into gear. I squared up dead center, mirrors tucked as tight as I could hold it. Front axle rolled onto timber with a deep groan that I felt through the floor. The Pete's nose dipped, rose, then settled onto the bridge like a big animal trying to decide if it would hold. The planks gave a little under my steers, a hollow drumbeat that synced to the roll of my tires. Half my attention was on the mirrors, keeping the trailer straight between the rails. The rest was on the far end on that lantern. It bobbed once, paused, bobbed again. A signal. You learn to distrust people waving you on in the middle of nowhere. I tapped the horn, just a polite touch, and the sound went nowhere, swallowed by the truss like it had never existed. The lantern answered 1, 2. Behind me, the world was pure absence. I crept forward. 50 feet, then 100. The bridge stretched longer than it had any right to. I cut the radio to kill the hiss. The night was suddenly intimate, every creak magnified. Something scuffed across timber behind my trailer tires. I checked the passenger mirror, just the smear of my spare tire and the welded edge of my ICC bumper. And then the driver's side. A line of shadow that might have been an old rivet seam looked like a human profile for a second, then wasn't. My neck prickled. I kept rolling. Slow, slow. The ABS light chattered once and stilled. My knuckles were pale on the wheel. I told myself to breathe, halfway maybe. The lantern at the far end swung wide, like whoever held it had stumbled or wanted me to hurry. I eased a hair more throttle to keep the momentum up, just enough to stay above idle. The decking changed, the pitch of the plank groan went higher, thinner. I felt the trailer sag hard on the right, a spring shiver through the frame, then catch. Instinct made my foot twitch toward the brake. Training stopped it. You never stab brakes on rotten wood, come on, I said to the truck. Come on, girl. The words were quiet and the cab ate them. Then the mirror showed motion where there shouldn't have been any. The passenger side, just beyond the trailer's tail. A low shape keeping pace in the rail shadows, not a person, not quite an animal. 4 feet? No. It moved wrong, like it was hinged in the middle and jointed too many times. It never quite touched the boards. It smeared. The reefer kicked on again and the noise was a comfort for a heartbeat. A human sound in a world that had none. Then it cycled off and the silence came rushing back. I told myself it was bad light and nerves. Eyes lie when you're tired. I checked the odometer trip, 0.6 since the detour began. The grade felt unchanging. A bridge should arc up then down. This was level forever. A sign rose up on my left, paint flaking, letters hand stenciled. Max load 10 tons. My mouth went dry. That wasn't the sign at the mouth. That wasn't legal anywhere in Texas to put this deep in a span. I stared at the deck, at a plank where someone had carved initials with a pocket knife. The date under it, 1954. My headlights washed over it and the numbers held. I downshifted and immediately regretted it. The weight shift made the timbers talk. A long, suffering creak that felt personal. The lantern at the far end stopped swaying and held steady, like someone had lifted their arm and locked their elbow. A gust found the canyon and pushed just once, and the bridge flexed under me, metal singing, wood answering. That was real. That was physics. I rode it out, jaw clenched, palm slick. I saw water then. Not the reflective kind. A darker dark between the ties where the planks didn't quite meet. I realized there were gaps. There's no good reason for a temporary deck to have spaces you can lose your footing in. I fixed my eyes on the center line, on old nail heads, on every tiny bit of honest matter I could trust. Another sign, same stenciled hand. One at a time. My phone buzzed in the cubby. I didn't look. Out here, there's no signal. A phone buzzing is a ghost. The ELD ticked 0213. Far end, 20 more yards maybe. The lantern dipped once like a nod. The shape in the mirror slid closer. It pressed itself flat to the rail if it had a body and then unfolded again. No sound, no breath, no paw or footstep. Just the idea of something moving. I felt the fine hair along my arms lift as if static had filled the cab. I did something then that doesn't make sense when I tell it. I reached for my triangle kit, pulled a road flare out with my right hand, bit the cap, struck it. The red phosphorus spit to life. Too bright, too hot. And the cab filled with chemical sting and a light that said, "Emergency," in a language older than me. I cracked my window and tossed it through the driver's side rail. It fell hissing, spinning sparks. There was no splash. There was no anything. It fell and the light thinned and then snuffed like I had thrown it into velvet. The smell of flare powder blew back and vanished like breath on glass. I stopped breathing for a beat, the way you do when a deer steps out and you can't hit the brake, because you're on black ice. Then training came back with a slap. If a bridge is lying to you, you get off it. If people want you to speed up, you slow down. If the world is telling you a thing that doesn't fit, you listen to the part of you that learned the road before GPS had a voice. I set the parking brake for the trailer only, left the tractor rolling slow, and felt the hiss run down the frame. The trailer tugged against me. The planks groaned, then held. I slipped it to neutral, killed my headlights, and the world went pure dark except for that lantern at the far end. It burned on. Something moved then that I could feel through rubber and steel. It wasn't the wind. It was a weight stepping onto the planks behind my tandems. The bridge answered with a small complaint. 1 step, 2. The air in the cab cooled until the breath on my upper lip felt like ice. My fingers found the air horn lanyard and I pulled it hard and long. The train whale of it tore out of the peat and died 3 yards beyond the bumper like it had hit a wall. The lantern dipped. Once. Twice. No, I told it. I don't know who I thought I was talking to. I eased the clutch, released the tractor brake, and rolled forward with the trailer still set. The bridge howled displeasure, but the rig crept. The act was ugly and wrong, dragging a locked trailer, but it moved the center of my weight, pulled me a yard closer to daylight that didn't exist. I stopped before metal screamed for real. Then I did the reverse. Tractor brake set, trailer released, a short, sharp reverse to pull slack. The bridge complained like an old house settling. 3 repetitions and I had moved maybe 2 truck lengths. The shape in the mirror kept pace, which is impossible for anything attached to the world. When I killed the lights, it should have been blind. But it was light blindness that had lied to me, not dark. It never needed light. I whispered, center line, and pictured my front axle exactly between rails and my trailer tires exactly in that same line. I didn't look at the lantern again. I kept my vision on rivets, on bolts, on the dents and wooden boards where 1,000 unknown wheels had passed. My foot found the throttle like it was the only warm thing left in the cab. We moved. One more groan that made fillings sing, and the nose came off timber and nosed onto asphalt so black it looked new. The lantern at my left flared like someone had snapped wrist to throw it, then winked out. The bridge behind me was suddenly only a silhouette against a darker hole. Wind touched the trailer and the truck twitched as if relieved. I rolled another 30 feet and eased to a stop on asphalt that felt like a friend. I put her in neutral. The ELD showed 0219. Outside, the night was no brighter than it had been, but it felt less crowded. CB crackled for the first time in 20 minutes. Some driver out near Marfa complaining about a skunk. My hands shook when I set my triangles down just to have something to do. I walked back with my flashlight beam cutting a narrow cone. River mud should smell like life. The air was clean and dry. The bridge deck looked different from this side, shorter and new, the truss lower than it should be. A kind of forced perspective. The sign at this mouth read 20 tons again, in that same clean paint that had never seen a West Texas noon. I didn't cross back to test it. 2 miles later, the detour spat me back onto US 90 as smooth as a table. The old confidence returned in layers. The honest center stripe, the polite signs, the hum of tires that meant normal. Another dozen miles and the Pecos Bridge rose where it always has. Tall, modern, a gray knife of concrete and steel. No construction. No barrels. No lantern. The canyon fell away on both sides and the wind did its two-tug trick. When I looked left for a river sparkle, I found only black, but the kind that belongs. I pulled into the picnic area west of the span and parked among the mesquite. The engine ticked as it cooled. Far below, the river finally made a noise I recognized. I sat with the window down and the smell of dust and diesel, and the last of the coffee in my cup holder. I called the sheriff's office in Del Rio, because I'm not a man who keeps quiet if a trick of the night could kill someone. The dispatcher was polite until I said temporary crossing, and then her voice thinned. She put me on hold and came back with a deputy who had a father who'd been a deputy, and I heard him say, cautious, "Sir, the old low steel bridge washed out in '54. Folks say you can still see the abutments when the river's low. There's no temporary anything out there, not for decades." I checked the dash cam the next morning in Albuquerque, my hands clean and my coffee fresh. It showed night, rough planks, my hood, and a smear where a lantern should have been. The road flare moment was a hole, a jump cut in the data like the world had blinked. My steers carried 2 slivers of wood like tiny arrows and smelled faintly of oil that wasn't mine. The tires left fine black dust on the shop floor that didn't read as rubber under my nose. The tech asked if I'd run through a lumber yard. I told him I had. I don't speed on bridges anymore. I don't trust detours drawn after midnight, and I watch my mirrors the way an animal watches a tree line. Sometimes, on a long pull through the dark, I think I see a warm light at the edge of my beams, the promise of someone waving me on, and I blink and keep to the center. If you run that stretch of 90 on a clear night and your Garmin gets anxious, do yourself a favor and ignore it. I crossed a bridge that wasn't there, or maybe it crossed me. I don't run superstition. I run reefer, east-west mostly. Produce out of California, meat back from the plains. That week I was hauling boxed beef, 40,000 even seals intact, temp set to 33 Fahrenheit. Trucks a 2017 Cascadia, Detroit DD15, 10-speed, 220-gallon split tanks, air ride good enough to keep a coffee cup riding the line. I was eastbound on I-40 in New Mexico, night shift by choice. Cooler air on the motor, less traffic, fewer people who don't understand blind spots. It had rained at sundown and moved on. The asphalt stayed damp, a thin sheen that held the smell of it. The wind had that plateau trick, steady on the nose with a cross gust that pushed the trailer a hand's width and then let go. Time on the ELD, 1.11. CB on 19, all skip and hiss. The occasional ghost of a voice from Amarillo or farther if the ionosphere felt generous. I keep my hours legal, my log clean, and my truck predictable. You build trust with repetition. Fuel in grants, coffee you can stand a spoon in, then roll to the next safe spot to stretch your legs. I had a habit of stopping at mile 102's rest area. Lights clean, decent bathrooms. The overhead sign said closed for maintenance. No cones on the ramp, just the word on LED. I rolled past, checked the mirrors, and let it go. Another sign a couple miles on promised rest area 3 miles. That would put it at mile 99. Blue signs don't lie. Not out here. I backed out of the throttle, gave the motor a minute to breathe, and slid to the right lane with time to spare. Shoulders wide, reflectors crisp. The kind of highway that makes you feel like the country is one continuous ribbon. The ramp to mile 99 peeled off with a decent taper. No nasty drop, no tight curve. The pavement changed under my steers from the music of interstate to the crunch of a state-run lot. I coasted in at idle, let the Jake hold me, and took the far end where semis line up nose to tail. 10 trucks already there. Most were dark, curtains drawn, reefers ticking. A tanker with no company decals, just a long white belly shining faint, idled near the exit. The cab had its visor lights on, but they didn't throw to the ground. You notice details like that when you live by light. I set the brakes, tractor first, then trailer, the 2 hisses polite and final. The reefer compressor kicked, the low thrum filling the cab. I did what I always do, jacket, flashlight, quick walk around. I keep my hand on the door until my boots hit to feel the temperature shift. Cab warmth to cold night. Diesel smell rides low. Out of the cab it gives way to wet dirt, a trace of creosote from the fence rails and that flat cold smell you get when a front is distant but coming. The lights in the rest building were on. Not the cold bright fluorescence they've been putting everywhere. These were warmer, a little yellow like older bulbs. The vending machines hummed. There was a Pepsi glow, a snack machine, a coffee kiosk with a card reader that blinked its green eyelid. The blue rest area mile 99 sign by the sidewalk looked new, reflective film without a nick. I clicked the flashlight on and swept it over my tires. No nails, tread honest. Then back to my rear doors, seal number matching the BOL, hinges clean. I reached up, hand on the latch like I always do, like a habit might keep a door shut by charm alone. The wind pushed once across the lot and lifted a damp paper napkin that snagged under my bumper. Far away, a coyote did that yip-yip thing, thin and bored. The CB crackled a breath and died. Inside the building, it was warmer than it should have been. A hand dryer sputtered once and quit, the kind of false start older units get when their sensors chase shadows. A single stall at the far end had its door shut and shoes showing under. Brown work boots, quiet. I washed up, the water running too hot first, as if the heater had been waiting. The mirror had a smear down the center, not a fingerprint, more like rain dried indoors. I stood there long enough for the mirror to clear, and it didn't. On my way back to the door, a payphone on the wall chirped. Not a ring, a chirp like a swallow of static. Nobody uses those anymore, but you still see the ghosts bolted to tile. This one had a handset, the plastic yellowed. I looked at it like you do when a thing past its time moves. It did it again. Not a ring. Just that little breath of electricity, like a person trying out a voice for the first time in a long while. I pushed the door with my shoulder and let night air clean my head. The lot looked the same. My truck sat there dignified and patient. The tanker idled. Its driver's seat was empty. The visor lights were on without shadows. That bothered me enough that I scanned again to find the source. Might have been fogging in the beam pattern, I told myself. Might have been overspill from a pole light somewhere out of line. The pole lights themselves did a thing I didn't like. They buzzed out of rhythm, 3 steady, 1 pausing every few counts as if remembering. I walked forward to the curb because the coffee from Grant's had gone through me fast. I wasn't looking for it. I want that on the record. The blue sign that said Rest Area, mile 99 had a hairline crack in the film I hadn't seen earlier. The crack ran straight through the 9 like a vertical seam. In the shadow my flashlight made, for a second it looked like the 9 split clean and made an 8. When I moved the beam, it was a 9 again. I told myself reflective film does tricks. I told myself that because everything else still held, wet asphalt, distant truck noise on the interstate, the low hum from the building. Back at the truck, I did a second walk around because muscle memory asked me to. Same tires, same seal, same airlines. The red one scuffed where it meets the glad hand. My flashlight swept under the trailer for idiots who nap under there and sometimes don't move. Clear. The concrete wheel stop had a scuff mark I didn't remember. A half moon like a shoe, right at the corner where a rubber sole would bite on a bad step. The scuff was on top of the wet, as if new. I put a finger to it, dry. I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. Not fear, just good sense. The dash clock read 01:29. I set the sleeper curtain half so I could see the mirrors. I cracked the window an inch. A small wind found it and wrote cold lines on my cheek. I keyed the mic. Eastbound at 99, area's clean? Static answered, then a voice not near me. Wind like hell at Tucumcari, watch your hats? Then nothing. The reverb told me it was farther than my eyes could throw. I tried to rest my eyes, but the interior felt too warm and the world outside a half step to the left. Sounds came separate instead of layered. My reefer's compressor, a drip from the building's eave hitting the same spot on concrete, and now and then the soft sigh of air shifting in a tank that didn't belong to my truck. You know your own machine. This breath was a different throat. Slow. Careful. Then the ticking of cooling metal somewhere to the right rear, like someone had set a small piece of hot iron on a shelf and waited for it to settle. At a 143, the CB cracked like knuckles and a voice came clear enough to make me look at the speaker. Female, older, calm. Westbound, you missed your turn. Don't get clever. Not at 99. She said it like it was a thing people knew and forgot. I picked up the mic. You got a handle? Dead air. The hiss felt visible. I didn't feel fear as much as the urge to settle accounts. I started the truck, gears stiff with the night. The headlights cut across the lot, hooked over the tanker and threw a stripe along its side. No placards. No company name. No dot numbers. A shape like that doesn't exist in the real world. As my beams crossed its tank, the light didn't curve. It ran straight like the metal had a flat to it, then caught up on the far side. I could call it perception. I could call it wet eyes. The truth is, it shouldn't have looked like that, and it did. I planned to drift the lot in a slow loop and roll back onto the interstate. Get wind on the hood, distance in the mirrors, and put the story away with the others we don't tell newer drivers. I dropped into gear, let the clutch out, the Cascadia eased forward. A man stepped into my beams from the far end of the row, under the half-blinking pole light. He raised a hand to signal me to stop. Safety vest faded, hard hat, the kind of stance a flagger uses to keep you from running over a trench they want to show you. I put my foot down firm but not hard, no brake squeal. He didn't move. He didn't look at me. He looked down the line of trucks at the building, then at the blue sign, then up, like he was ticking boxes against a list I couldn't see. Long enough passed that my foot felt the pedal shape through the boot. The vest man lowered his hand and stepped backward without turning. He went out of my beams. He should have gone into shadow and out of sight. Instead, the beam caught the rain on the asphalt behind him like a body heat signature, and for a breath there were 2 dark, wet boot prints, and then there weren't. No sound beside my fan. I didn't call out. Sound carries strange and empty lots and gives direction to things you don't want following. I eased around the loop. The exit ramp's arrow pointed left. I took it. The truck climbed the slight grade, the interstate's white dash lines rising to meet me. And I put my turn signal on like you do when the night is still a place where rules hold. A wall of black slid across my windshield like someone drew a curtain. Not fog, no crystals in the beams. Not smoke, no smell. Just a nothing that made the road stop a foot from my bumper. I held gear. The truck rolled slow, faithful. Then my headlights touched the rest area mile 99 sign from the other side. The building lights ahead, warmer than they should be. The same 10 trucks, mine included if I believed my own eyes. A red rag hung off a flatbed stake pocket on the far row. I had not seen it before. It moved without wind, like breath had weight now. I turned the wheel gently as if the lot were glass. You can push yourself into a panic and make stupid shapes. This felt like a test of patience or pattern. The exit arrow again. The ramp again. The interstate closed its curtain again. The lot returned. I watched my dash clock tick 0149, then 0150, then 0149 again. It wasn't a loop. The second hand didn't jump back. The numbers changed like a slot machine fails to lock. The reefer kicked. That sound was real. I went back to the box, put my hand on the latch, the steel cold enough to bite through the glove. I didn't open it. I watched the padlock, old scar across its face as if breath might fog there. Nothing. I took triangles out because rules are anchors. I set one behind the trailer 20 paces, 150, 100. The lot swallowed them. My flashlight found only pavement where I had left plastic. I touched the spot hard. Nothing moved under my palm. No heat. Toe trick. Something tapped the aluminum belly box on the passenger side from inside like a finger on a table. I opened it and saw what I always see. Chains, bars, spare gloves coiled like sleeping snakes. The chain oil smelled right. A tool rolled just enough to say gravity still knew me. When I shut it, the sound wasn't the same sound it makes. It was a small echo from farther away than the space inside. At a 2:03, the female voice came back, closer. Don't get clever. Back into a slot, lights off, curtains shut, a pause softer. Wait for the 4. I told myself the Interstate Patrol sometimes monitors rest areas on a side channel and pushes advice. I didn't believe it, but I told it anyway. I backed into the space I had left. I killed the headlights. I shut the curtains. The truck became a box of warmth with my breath loud in it. I counted by the reefer's cycle because seconds were not trustworthy. First cycle, the compressor started and stopped. Second, started and stopped. Third, the sheet of black outside the glass felt like it leaned in, listening. Fourth, the reefer kicked and stayed on. The wind hit the cab twice in quick succession. Woof, woof, like a hand. A truck passed on the interstate, tires singing, and the poles hummed in the old rhythm again. I pulled the curtain a finger width and saw true highway light moving where it should. Not bending wrong, not darkening at its edges. The blue sign's 9 was a 9. I turned the key. The Detroit came up as always. I pulled out. The exit arrow led me to the ramp, and this time the interstate opened like a throat. White lines where they belong. A lone pickup out in the left lane, taillight steady. I eased into traffic, signal off, and slowly let my muscles remember that a man is an animal that can live when a game looks at him and chooses to pass. 5 miles later, a state trooper sat in the median. Black and gold, rear glass full of antennae. I keyed the mic. Appreciate the advice back there. No answer. He didn't move. A dust devil tried to stand up in his headlights and failed. I caught a fuel stop at Santa Rosa. New receipts that smell like ink and cheap glue. The attendant had a Polaroid taped to the lotto machine by the coffee. 2 men posed in front of a rest area sign, blue white letters, mile 99, from a decade when hats were different and belts were wider. Someone had written temporary maintenance crew under it, pen lines fading. The date in the corner was 30 years old. The attendant said he didn't know who put it up, that it had always been there. His hand left a coffee ring under the plastic. I checked my dash cam that afternoon in daylight. It showed I had taken the ramp at mile 99, idled along the outer row, and left by the same ramp 7 minutes later. The interior audio caught me breathing and the reefer clicking. At 0149, the footage stuttered a single frame to a wash of snow, analog snow, not digital, and then resumed. The recording of the payphone chirp was a soft bird call when nothing in that building should have had power enough to pretend to be a bird. I don't stop at mile 99 anymore. If the sign says it's coming up at the right time of night, I let the white lines roll and hold a little extra caffeine. If I have to stop, I pick a shoulder at an exit ramp with a good sight line, hazard lights stuttering, tires on gravel that bites back. And when I feel the wind tap the cab twice, I count to 4 and don't get clever. If you see a rest area that looks newer than the road around it, with lights that are a little warmer than LEDs and a blue sign whose 9 has a seam, keep your wheels straight and your foot steady. Not every place wants you. Some places count you. I run night freight because the dark lets you hear your truck think. My lane that week was cold country. Yakima to Pocatello with a drop in Twin Falls, then empty back to Boise for a backhaul. 2015 Kenworth T680, Packer MX-13, 10-speed manual, block heater that smells faintly of hot dust when it first kicks in, 42,000 pounds of mixed dry goods riding steady on air, chains in the box, de-icer under the seat, and a thermos of coffee so strong it left an iron taste in my mouth. The date doesn't matter. The hour does. On my ELD, it was a 1:08 when I slid east out of Mountain Home, and the temperature blinked 14 degrees and falling. The sky was clean, stars shaved sharp. The ground lied. Black ice had polished I-84 until it looked like wet obsidian, a thin, reflective skin that held light without giving any back. The cab was warm enough to make my fingers forget. Every few minutes, I cracked the window an inch to smell the night and pay attention. It smelled like diesel with a metal edge, like the inside of a freezer that hadn't been opened in a long time. The tires wrote a soft hiss on the pavement, and the wind made that long, low hum, a taut string you can't see. The CB sat on 19, all skip and static. Every now and then, a voice from too far away rode in on the ionosphere and went to ground before it reached sense. The first overpass past Mountain Home, Old Oregon Trail Road, came up, and I eased off just enough to notch the weight down a degree before the shadow. It's a habit from years in the rain belt. You lift a hair under a bridge where ice grows thicker. My high beams carved out girders in the pale concrete belly. For 1 second, there was motion in the hard light. A dark vertical shape in the exact center of the underside, narrow as a man, long as a fall, the bottom end tapering into nothing. The image was so quick my brain filed it as a smear on glass. Even so, my hands tightened. I checked the mirrors. Nothing except my own marker lights trailing like beads. I tapped the washer to be sure. Fluid hissed, froze, failed. Wipers chattered once, then gave up. The windshield was clean. A mile later, another overpass, a county road that didn't matter. Same habit, same lift, same cut of light. There it was again, a shape hanging dead center, legs together, then a small sideways twitch like a suspended thing catching the slipstream. It wasn't a shadow thrown by something else. It had its own dark. The CB antenna on the passenger side, the long whip, ticked once against the fiberglass fairing and then once more, harder, like something had tapped it with a finger. I glanced right. It still arced in its usual lazy bow. My chest crawled like I'd swallowed a handful of moths. You don't panic on black ice. Panic puts you in the ditch. I did what training and winter teach. Eyes up, hands quiet, feet gentler than prayer. I told myself it was the angle of sodium lights, the way overpass seams gather grime, maybe icicles breaking. I told myself the shape didn't swing by volition. The wind made it look that way. I watched the hood, the line where light ends and dark begins. The world stayed smooth. Mile marker 107 slipped by in blue. Then Simcoe Road's overpass grew and passed above me. I dropped 3 miles an hour without meaning to. The cold climbed past my boots and up my legs like something sentient. In the lights, the same form, dead center, legs long, knees bent like a man whose muscles had remembered. This time it moved, unmistakable. A slow side to side that wasn't windproof physics. The tip of it, the boot shape that wasn't a boot, brushed the CB whip, and the whip pinged the cab in a bright, stupid little sound, tinny and human and petty against all that black. The sound punched through me harder than any siren could. I keyed the mic anyway because that's what you do when you want the world to stay normal. Eastbound 84, any of you catch something under the last overpass? Static like dry snow in a glove. Then a voice far away. Roger, wind. Watch your... and gone. I thought about pulling into the next truck stop and thawing my head. The road was a clean ribbon. The night wanted me to keep going. I kept going. The overpasses between Mountain Home and Jerome are measured like breaths. I started counting without deciding to. 1 shape, slight swing. 2 shape, definite swing, antenna ping. 3 shape, no swing, stillness like a held note. 4 shape, closer to the hood, enough that my stomach felt it before my eyes. 5 I told myself to look at the lane and not at the ceiling. 6 my high beams cut through and the thing was at the mouth of the overpass, not under it, like it had drifted toward me and then recovered. 7 no shape at all, just clean concrete and frost, and the sudden absence was worse than sight. Ice is a liar. It hypnotizes you with sameness. So does fear. I checked my tires with the ball of my foot against the floor. The vibration was the same honest hum. My hands were dry on the wheel, too dry, the skin tight enough to crack. I sipped coffee that had gone bad in the thermos and it tasted like cold pennies. Approaching bliss. The wind came off the Snake River Canyon with a particular voice. A low, steady push under the crosswind, and my trailer moved a finger's worth to the right, then back like the night was counting with me. The Bliss Road overpassed through a hard rectangle of dark down over the lane. As I went under, the legs were there too close and something touched the mirror glass. Not a hit, a brush that left no smear, only the knowledge that glass had been touched. The Kenworth's hood mirror flicked a hair and steadied. The CB antenna ticked the fairing again, not once but twice, ping ping. I said no out loud, the word small in the warm cab, and eased my speed again. The ice sang its long whisper, and the part of my brain that loves math started measuring, following distances and stopping distances and traction in percentages, while another part tried to put a name to what a set of legs with no body would belong to if it had a right to be here. The Jerome way station sat dark and empty, sign flipped to closed, scales asleep, bay doors shut, sodium lights humming. I thought about rolling in anyway and parking on the apron and letting bureaucracy save me by accident. I didn't. Empty way stations feel too much like chapels when you want the world to make noise. Between Jerome and Twin Falls, the freeway stacks up a sequence of overpasses close together as it braids with local roads. Each one gave me the same equation: light, concrete, shadow, movement. My dashcam's tiny status LED blinked like a metronome. The heater fan wrote a soft high note across the low hum of the road. My breath left an invisible film on the inside of the glass that never condensed. When I reached to crack the window again, the rubber weather strip felt like stone. Midpoint escalation wasn't a story beat. It was a fact. At Blue Lakes Boulevard, I went under and the legs came down low enough that the tip ticked the hood emblem. Not a clunk. A click like a fingernail across chrome, intimate and wrong. The sound lived in my teeth for a second. I felt the smell of something colder than the outside air, like freezer burn and old pennies. I checked the hood cameras out of habit and saw my own lights, my own paint, and a small place on chrome that wasn't wet anymore. I signaled anyway, 1 click off, 1 click on, because rules make religion in the dark. I rolled into Twin Falls and made my drop, hands steady enough to sign papers and back into a dock without a pull-up, because muscle memory can be more stubborn than fear. Warehouse light made my eyes ache. The air in the dock smelled like cardboard and hot forklift exhaust and onions from a busted pallet somewhere. The receiver joked about the cold. I grinned with my mouth and not my eyes. When I climbed back into the Kenworth, I watched my own breath fog the cab. That also shouldn't have happened with the heater at that setting. Eastbound again, lighter by 23 pallets. Chains still unused. Black ice still everywhere. Overpasses still coming in measured steps. I told myself whatever had happened was behind me and stayed behind me like all the bad things that had not killed me yet. Near Eden, past a stand of trees hard as iron in the night, a pickup sat sideways on the right shoulder with hazards punching orange across bare snow. I glanced to be sure it wasn't in my lane, and the overpass ahead swallowed the orange like somebody had flipped a switch. Under the concrete belly, the legs were there again, darker than the night, and this time there were more than legs. Above them, not a torso, not a person, just a swelling darker than dark, like smoke made of cold. It didn't swing, it leaned. The antenna swept up and touched it, and the steel didn't ping. The steel quieted. For one beat, the CB whip looked like it had been dipped in ink that absorbed light. Then it was just steel again, shivering in its own spring. I put 2 wheels on the rumble strip for the comfort of the vibration. The growl came up through the frame and into my bones and said, "You're still on a road. You still belong here." The shape didn't mind. The shape didn't do anything I could photograph. It went on being. Climax came at the Kimberly Road overpass because that one's low and the grade plays tricks. As I came under, the legs dropped, not swinging, dropping like the hangman had remembered his job. The bottom end hit the hood, glassing across it. There was no weight. There was no impact. The effect was the effect of effect, like a thought passed through my truck. The dash lights dimmed just a fraction. The CB went to a clean dead for a heartbeat. My heater fan hiccuped and the Kenworth's engine note lost one tone and then found it again. The road didn't change. The ice sang the same. I didn't brake. I didn't accelerate. I held the wheel as if my hands were part of it and let the shape do whatever such shapes do. Then it was gone, as if the dark had wrung itself out and gone dry. I took the next exit ramp, the one with the long, gentle climb and a wide shoulder, and parked under the overpass to make the night show me its cards. I set the brakes with frozen care. The twin hisses hung in the air, white as breath. I killed my lights. The world became the kind of black that has no edges. Above me, concrete, frost lacing up the seams, the faint sound of my own truck clicking as heat bled away. A small drift of snow had gathered in the belly of the bridge like white lint. Icicles hung along the edge like old teeth. They were still. They were the only honest hanging thing. I stepped out, boots finding purchase because the shoulder gravel had frozen into a rough skin. The wind parked its hand on my cheek and pressed, not mean, just businesslike. I tilted my head back and looked, and the stars were there between beams like chips of ice. The space where a man's legs would have been was only space. My CB antenna ticked once in the wind and made its right sound. The smell under the bridge was simple. Concrete, old water, road salt. Diesel burned to a faint tang that never leaves your clothes. I stood there until my face ached and my knuckles went red and the cold threaded up the sleeves of my jacket and tugged at my elbows. Nothing moved but the world. I climbed back in and rolled slow to the next exit with a truck stop. The coffee was bad and hot and honest, the kind that will save you purely on insult. In the morning, parked in full sun that had no heat, I pulled the SD card from the dash cam and scrubbed through the night. Under every overpass, the video stuttered. Not a dropout. Not a compression artifact, a repeat. 2 or 3 frames doubled as if the camera had blinked and tried to pretend it hadn't. In each doubled chunk, there was a smear darker than the rest, the shape of legs if you wanted to see it. Frame by frame, it grew a pixel or 2 closer each time. On the Kimberly Pass, the smear touched the bottom of the frame. The time code skipped 1 second forward and 1 back before correcting like a hand had bumped it. I looked at the CB whip in daylight. The steel had a faint gray line at the pointed bows furthest, not dirt, not ice, more like a field line burned into metal without heat. I ran my thumb along it until the pad went numb. It didn't come off. I called a friend who runs DOT for ideas about power lines and static. He said overpasses can build weird charges. Winter plays games, keep a strap on the frame to ground the antenna. That made sense. It did not explain why the heater fan hiccuped or why the glass felt touched. I've run that route since. Overpasses still throw their hard rectangles. I lift for ice out of habit. The cab stays warm and clean and my hands don't crack as much. Sometimes the whip ticks the fairing with its bright small sound, and sometimes it is perfectly quiet, a silver line that answers only to wind. Sometimes when the road is empty and the sky has more stars than sky, I think I see legs in the high beams under a bridge that hasn't learned my name yet. I don't look long. I put both wheels dead center in my lane and hold as steady as a man can. There are places the world thins and lets old shapes test their weight on us. Maybe it's the cold that sharpens them. Maybe it's simply that the underside of a thing is where it
keeps what it doesn't want you to see. If
you're running Idaho on black ice and your antenna pings a sound you've never heard, and every overpass shows you a smudge darker than shadow, don't swerve. Don't brake. Keep your hands soft and your eyes where the lane is. Whatever's counting you only owns what you give it. I run winter because it's honest. Summer lets fools pretend they're good drivers. Winter keeps a ledger. My lane that week was Denver to Grand Junction with a high-value dry box, 28 pallets of medical disposables that prefer warmth but don't demand it. 2016, Peterbilt 579, ISX, 10-speed, full lockers, fresh rubber on the drives, chains in the side box, triangles in the rear compartment, and a heater core that smells like hot dust when you first ask it to work. Total gross, $76,140. I-70 westbound, at night through the high country, Eisenhower Vale, the canyon. It started as a gentle storm and turned into something else. I rolled out of Commerce City at 2209, ELD green, coffee bitter enough to teach a lesson. Milepost 259 passed under me. Then the climb began. Wind yawning through the gaps, the kind of cold that finds the bones of the cab. I checked CDOT on the overhead. Chains advised, then again near Georgetown. Chains required for CMV when flashing. The lights weren't flashing yet, and the plows were still making daylight in bursts. I kept her tidy. 8th gear, 1/400 on the tack, speed a shade below what the signs called legal. Jake on low, because ice doesn't care about your confidence. There's a shoulder pullout before the tunnel where we stage if it goes sideways. That night, a pair of rigs eased out of it nose to tail and slotted in ahead of me like I'd been waiting for them. They ran clean. Both mid-2000s Kenworths with old-school square noses, orange cab markers, and company names I didn't recognize. Ghost white under the snow crust. Their taillights were the honest kind. No LEDs trying to be a nightclub, just 2 red eyes per trailer that didn't blink. They settled into a pace that felt like a man counting his breaths. I set a respectful interval and we became 3 trucks in a line, the safest shape you can make in weather like that. CB on 19 sounded like frying bacon. Now and then sense came through. Westbound at the tunnel, right lane moves, left lane dies. Copy, got a 4-wheeler sideways at Silverthorne on-ramp. Watch for a plow coming out of the median. The 2 ahead of me were talking on a side channel. I could sense the cadence, the little pauses and answers. But my unit didn't pick them up until one of them slid over to 19 and said, crisp and close, "We'll take you through the blow, Pete. Stay in line." I keyed up. "Appreciate you. Keep your lights down a notch. Watch brake lights, not snow." We took the tunnel like ghosts sliding through a throat, the world instantly close and warm and yellow and loud with our own engine notes. I watched my mirror lights flicker on the tile. I smelled hot antifreeze from somewhere ahead, just a touch of it, like memory. We popped out into dark that didn't match what went in. The storm had thickened while we were inside. The wind hit. The nose, a long hand, and shoved. The trailer answered with a step left, then right. I set my jaw and let the tires speak. The red eyes in front of me never changed pace. Down the west side, the storm turned from snow to glass dust. It didn't fall. It hung and moved sideways, filling the high beams with a blizzard of needles. The road had that polished look, patches reflecting light like black water but crunching like sugar. I lifted just 2 miles an hour, kept the wheel still like it would shatter if I breathed too hard on it. The 2 ahead held slate steady. Once, the rear one's ABS light winked and died. The driver corrected so gently the trailer looked like it had decided to behave on its own. Past Silverthorne, the sign flashed. Chains required now. And the shoulders bloomed with 4-ways, drivers cursing their fingers into iron. The 3 of us slid past, either grandfathered by timing or blessed by the fact nobody wanted to flag us down into someone else's wreck. The radio went weird, clear, and then scrambled like a cassette warping, then went to ground except for the close man's voice. "Stay in line." We slept in the pockets of plow wakes. When they peeled off, we ate the full blast. Below Frisco, under an overpass, crosswind tried to lift the box. I felt it in the palm of the wheel, light, then heavy. "Center line," I told myself. Eyes far. The red eyes ahead deepened as if the driver had taken a half-pound of brake just to show the shape of the speed. I matched it. Our brakes sighed in sympathy, 3 tired animals exhaling at once. Vale Pass upbound is a slow argument with a mountain. We ran it in 6th and then 5th, the 3 of us pacing like a heartbeat. The snow changed its texture, bigger flakes that smeared at the edges, then tiny grit that stung the windshield. My defroster wrote warm fingers across the glass. Wherever it didn't touch, frost grew in lace. My hands went dry as salt. The heater smelled like old fabric baking. At the summit, a sign flickered, shorted, then held. Wind advisory. The gust that met us had no temperature. It was absence. My trailer took a sidestep like a dancer told to turn. The red eyes ahead never quivered. The radio said, "Line," and we obeyed. The descent demanded humility. Jake's off until traction told me its name. I tapped the brakes the way you tap a shoulder in a crowded bar. Polite, apologetic, then let them go, then tapped, then went on. The world outside the glass went white and then gray and then white again. The dotted lane lines vanished. Only the faint ribbing of other truck tires told a story in the snow. Somewhere between the pass and Minturn, the radio voices died like somebody closed a door. The close driver's stay in line went empty enough that it picked up the crackle of my own heater fan. I keyed. Copy. My voice sounded like I was already far away. There was no reply. The red eyes ahead kept their pulse. Past Avon, the canyon tightened, rock rising black at the edges of the beam. Snow slid off the ledges in sheets and broke in a sound that never reached the cab. The wind lost itself and the world felt padded, wrapped. We moved like a train, 3 engines and 3 mindless boxes behind them. My shoulders dropped a fraction with the mercy of steady air. My eyelids tried to tell me this was normal, that we run like this all the time through the night, steady, sure, alone together. At Gypsum, a small sedan sat pinwheeled on the shoulder, hazards punching orange into the snow. A man hunched in. A hood stood with his hand up to his brow like he could hold the world still. The red eyes ahead never even dipped. The sedan slid backward a foot while I watched. No grade to speak of, just ice deciding the rules. I wanted to stop. I felt my foot build weight. I didn't. You don't save strangers by turning a 39-ton problem into a 40-ton problem. The storm swallowed Eagle. The river disappeared. The red eyes ahead felt closer now, the distance between us shrinking without the math showing it. I reset my following distance by feel. It shrank. I tried again. The red eyes leaned away, and then slid near again. They felt like breath on glass, always the same distance no matter how far you wipe. Line, the radio breathed, a whisper drawn across a wire. It sounded like wind in a pipe. I said line, back because people answer when spoken to even when nobody's there. Dot matrix signs out here will sometimes glitch in cold. I saw one near .0 stacked with a message that didn't finish and then flashed clean. Watch for ice. I grinned without humor. The snow took the grin and made it a fog on the glass. The canyon opened a touch. Air moved like a thing relieved. The red eyes ahead flicked right like a thought and then burned steady again. That was when I realized something wrong that had been wrong, and politely waiting its turn to be heard. There were no spray plumes. At that speed in this snow, you get a rooster tail of powder from every tire. The 2 ahead threw nothing. The air behind them was clean as if they had never been. The snow on the roadway lay smooth a second after their axles passed. No ruts, no shaded tracks, no scars in the sugar. Their taillights burned and their weight didn't weigh. I felt the sweat go cold in my armpits. The cab got warmer by half a degree. My breath made a small cloud in the cabin light I didn't know was there. The heater fan rode its high whine, and beneath it the engine hummed the way a machine hums when it knows there's nothing left but the things it can do. At Glenwood Canyon's mouth, the wind came back with teeth. The 3 of us crept into a bowl of rock. Overhead, the cliffs leaned in until the snow fell at a slant impossible to learn. The red eyes of the lead truck pulsed twice and held. The radio said line from the bottom of a well. I said nothing. I watched their lights like a man prays with his eyes open. The chaos moment came not in a skid or a spin or a horn, but in silence. The world brightened a shade that wasn't color, just less dark. The east lip of the canyon grew a suggestion of edge. The storm thinned to a fine dust. I blinked and registered a horizon. Dawn. The word touched something old in me, some animal that knows when to put its head down and when to lift it. The heater changed pitch as if pleased. A plow ghosted by in the opposite lanes and threw a wave of snow that never reached us. The 2 trucks ahead rolled on. Then the light changed from suggestion to the kind that lands on matter. Gray turned to blue. Rock woke up. Texture happened. The taillights ahead of me, 2 pairs of fixed red eyes that had held me together all night, did not dim. They didn't reflect on the new wet. They didn't belong. They simply weren't there. I blinked. Road only. Sky only. The space where a truck goes was just space. I eased out of the throttle. I didn't touch the brake. I let the truck speak its weight to the world and come down a mile an hour, then 2, then 5. The CB hissed. The heater returned to ordinary. The snow had become a polite sift. There were no tracks ahead of me. Not 2 sets worth, not 1. The fresh fall would have softened edges but not erased. My own tire marks behind me drew a truthful pair like stitches in fabric. Ahead, blank. I pulled into the first chain station west of Glenwood Springs because that's where you go when your hands need something to do. I set the brakes, tractor, trailer. The hiss is sharp in the thin morning. The sky went pink on the far ridge, then gray again. I climbed down and smelled the world. Hot engine, cold iron, the sour metal scent of old snow. A hint of diesel spilled by someone else in a hurry. I walked out into the chain-up lane and looked at the pavement. The snow that had fallen since dawn had a crust to it. Where tires cut it, edges stood up like torn paper. In the eastbound lanes, tracks like a bad dream, me and no one else. I called dispatch because that's the rule after weather nights. Check in, confess, and brag in equal parts. The night guy answered, voice froggy with boredom. I told him my mileposts and made a joke about guardian angels with CDLs. He didn't laugh. He put me on hold, the music cutting in and out with the kind of distortion you get when a cable's been pinched too long. When he came back, he had a careful tone. You say you fell in line with 2 of ours? Names on the doors? Didn't catch them. Old KWs, square hoods, clean lights, copy, paper ruffled, keys tapped. We lost 2 and 15 at mile 162 on black ice. Pair of Kenworths convoying home. I-70 shut down 8 hours. I was the one answered the state police when they called. Same night, same mile marker. If you stayed with anyone out there, it wasn't anybody I can pay. I don't tell him what I heard on the radio. I don't tell him how the heater went warmer when the sun said its quiet hello, and how that felt like a hand leaving my shoulder. I hang up, drink coffee that tastes like cardboard and hope, and check my dash cam because men like me need proof one way or another. The footage shows a white until dawn night. The lane ahead is bones of reflector posts and snow. The microphone catches the low note of the engine, the soft saw of the fan, and the occasional sigh of air in a line. Every time I key up and say copy, I sound like I'm talking to myself. There are no taillights ahead for the sensor to find. When the storm thins and light opens the canyon, the camera makes a tiny digital hiccup like it forgot to breathe, and then there's nothing in front of me but road. I-70 cleaned itself that day. Sun came and made diamonds of the mess. At Parachute, I fueled and watched a pair of KWs roll through the lot nose to tail, square hoods, old souls. Their lights had shadows and their tires threw honest spray. The smell they left behind was diesel and hot rubber and a little touch of chain lube. I stood there in the exhaust as it thinned and thought about lines and what holds them. I still run winter. I set my intervals like I mean them. When the storm makes a room around me and the radio goes to the kind of quiet that's older than radios, I don't get clever. If I fall in with company and they run clean and steady and the heater smells like dust and dawn, moves like a promise with no date, I keep my eyes where the lane lives and do the simplest job a man can do with both hands. And if the lights ahead of me go out exactly when the world gets light enough to not need them, I say copy to nobody, and I keep going. Some nights the wind at the tunnel takes a step across my hood. When it does, I think I hear a voice in the skip that isn't skip. Stay in line. It's not a warning. It's a shape. Its hands motioning me through a place where the ledger is open and the world is keeping count. I run nights because winter teaches you what you're worth. My lane that week was Fargo to Billings, dry van. 30 pallets of non-hazard cleaning supplies strapped tight. Nothing that cared about temperature beyond the way plastic gets brittle when it forgets how to be warm. Trucks a 2018 Kenworth T680, MX-13 10-speed, fresh caps on the drives, chains in the sidebox. A heater core that smells like toasted lint the first time you ask it to work. Gross was an easy 67,000. I-94 westbound, North Dakota in January. Stars ground sharp. Air dry enough that the inside of your nose felt like paper. LD stamped 0041 when I cleared the west side of Jamestown. Wind out of the northwest. Steady 20 with gusts that made the trailer take polite steps, then come home. Plows had been through at sundown and left snow berms along the median. 6 inches high, crusted hard. The asphalt had that black glass look. No snow, just a skin so thin it held the world like a mirror and stole traction like a rumor. I tucked into the right lane, kept my speed 10 under, and let the hood settle. CB sat on 19 like always. Nights out here you at least get ghosts. Skip from Minnesota, a hand in Montana singing off-key, a plow boss calling his crew numbers. That night it was nothing. No hiss, no spark, just dead plastic, as if I'd set a microphone on a headstone. I smacked the side out of habit. No change. I cracked the window an inch, let the night come in, and log my breath. A thin smoke that curled and stayed. Diesel smell, faint and metallic, mixed with the cold sweetness you only get off prairie snow that hasn't seen a dog or a boot in a week. Bismarck's glow showed up like a bruise low on the horizon. Windmills out there blink red in lines that make you feel counted. Sign ahead read, "Bridge may be icy." They may as well all say that. I loosened my hands, 10 and 2, pressure you could measure, and let the engine brake stay on low. A soft back of the throat growl, more comfort than function on glass. At mile 178, a curve leans left around a shallow dip where the Missouri starts thinking about itself. The topcoat ice there first, nothing to see, everything to feel. I saw it in the beam, not as a shine, but as an absence of texture. A flattening of the world, like someone had taken fine sandpaper to the lane. My foot lifted 2 pounds. My palms remembered the angle where a correction turns into a mistake. That's when the CB woke up. Not a normal squawk. It came alive like a breath caught between teeth. A soft hiss, then a voice on the wire, close, not loud. "Easy now, 10-4, it sounded like me." Not me in a speakerphone way. Me like a recording you didn't know someone was making. Same weight on the vowels, same lazy drop on the R, the same tired throat at 1 in the morning when the coffee turns to pennies. I laughed once in my chest and told myself the brain steals voices when it's bored. I keyed anyway. "Who's out here?" My own voice came back in the cab, normal and small. Silence. The curve tightened a hair. The trailer took a half step on the ice, then a half step back like a dancer humoring a partner. The heater fan's high whine sounded a key flat, like it had been asked to sing in a colder room. My breath fogged a thin crescent on the side window that didn't fade. Another whisper from the CB. Exactly when my brain made the words as a comfort. Light hands. "Look far, you've got it." I didn't key up. I held the wheel where it had been good and let the road bring itself under me. The crosswind reached a hand into the box and tried to take it. The tires hummed a higher note in reply. Somewhere a strap under the cargo shift ticked. The hood mirror vibrated once, blurring the reflectors along the shoulder into a string of pearls and then letting them become dots again. "Mandan scales closed," the voice said, friendly and tired in a way I know I get. "You'll roll clean." I could see the way station sign way off, a rectangle of amber sitting dull. Maybe someone else was passing it, and the reflection of their thought had gotten in my head. The CB didn't hiss like Skip, didn't carry distance. It felt like a hand on my shoulder that I knew from inside. The dead air held. Engines talk to you when the radio won't. The MX-13 smoothed down into its winter hum and the dash threw faint instrument light on the back of my knuckles. I put my coffee back in the holder without looking, muscle memory dropping it into the ring with a plastic click that sounded too loud. The Missouri Bridge rose up a dark ahead, the guardrails frosting white, the far shore a deeper void. I eased another mile an hour off and kept the wheel quiet. My hood slid through the center of the lane like I'd measured it. "Don't brake," the voice said. And I wasn't braking, but the words were exactly the words that flickered in my head as a warning. They matched syllable for syllable. "Eyes where you want to go." I crossed the river below, a black that felt thicker than water. On the far side, the grade pulled down gentle and the wind forgot me for 3 breaths. The CB breathed once and went dead again, like a sleeping thing rolling onto a cooler spot. I could hear the little clicks in the dash plastic as hot air met very cold glass and made treaties. Bismarck's ramps came and went. Sodium lights on the overpasses threw smeared halos, each one a coin melted on the underside of concrete. The west edge of town died quickly into ranch dark. The wind returned in thicker fingers. The ice, if anything, looked truer. I thought of the DOT camera stills I'd scrolled. At the last fuel, grainy black and whites, of empty lanes and one unlucky SUV kissing, a guardrail under a caption that said "Travel not advised." I ran anyway, because that's what the ledger demands when you signed your name on Tuesday and the product clock started ticking. The CB's face stayed black. I touched it and the plastic felt warmer than my fingertips. I left my hand there longer than I needed. like you do when you're not ready to see if a dog will bite. The road hummed. Past Minokan, there's a shallow S that looks innocent on the map and writes obituaries when north wind and southbound exhaust cross. I set up for it like I'd set up 1,000 curves. Eyes up, pressure down, Jake quiet, mine 3 seconds ahead of the hood. And the trailer didn't argue. Somewhere in that S, the voice came again, no preamble, no squelch crack. You're thinking left 2 clicks and a long breath. That's good, I wasn't talking. I hadn't keyed. Those were the exact words I said to myself inside my head. The ones I know to say because your hands do better when the rest of you stays in the same sentence. I grinned without wanting to. Okay, I said into my own mouth, not into the mic. Okay, the voice said, not on a delay, but on me. Like a mirror, but not facing me. Like the angle had shifted a hair and I was catching myself from the side. By Sterling, the snow berms glowed with starlight. The prairie went flat enough that your headlights felt weak and your taillights felt like a promise you couldn't keep. I told myself to stop in the next rest area, get out, feel the world under my boots, reset the cabin air. The blue sign promised one at mile 170. The long green milepost ticked down like a timer. The radio, soft as breath. You mean mile 170 and you do not mean to pull in. I turned the volume knob down 3 notches. The absence didn't change. The voice hadn't been volume, it had been proximity. I took the ramp anyway. The lot was a white plate with truck tracks cutting geometry across it and then freezing into fossil shapes. I picked the far row, used the faint line of a buried curb as a reference, backed straight in first try because sometimes your body can run without the part of you that needs proof. Brakes set, tractor hiss, trailer hiss, lights off. The cab went warm around me like it was trying to be a room for a man, not a machine for a job. I killed the engine. The sudden quiet was so absolute I heard my pulse in the helix of my ear. The reefer in the next row thrummed and fell still. The world shed sound like a truck sheds ice sheets on a good road. My breath hung in a pale cone and didn't break. The CB crackled in a way radios do not when you remove the hum of an alternator. A dry whisper, then my voice, my exact dead of winter been awake 20 hours voice. Don't bother with the triangles. You won't need them. I opened the door. Cold punched the warmth out of my lungs and left something clean and hard behind. The step bit my boot hard enough that I felt it in my arch. The smell out there was diesel frozen in place, snow iron. A ghost trace of urine blown into crystal under the picnic table. I walked around and put a hand on the trailer door latch the way you do. Because touch makes real. The steel bit like a bad thought. Above me, the stars told their quiet old lie about distance. The lot lights hummed at a pitch too high for instruments. The only moving thing was a torn flyer trying to be a bird and failing. Inside the cab, with the door open and the dome light bleeding a soft yellow onto the ice, the CB kept breathing. You're thinking about shutting me off, it said in my voice. You always do right before. Right before what? I asked and found my breath writing a ribbon in the cold with each syllable, an answer to itself. Silence. Then, small, patient. Easy now, 10-4. I reached for the radio power. My fingers didn't want the switch. You learn to listen to small refusals when the big ones kill you. I shut the door instead. The dome light clicked off and the cab returned to that close warm you only get when the windshield stops pretending to be part of outside. The heater fan wound up like a throat clearing. The voice got closer. You can't hear me when the tires sing, it said. Not until the curve. Not until it's glass and you've already chosen the wrong breath. I don't like people telling me how my hands work. I started the truck out of spite or out of reason, I don't know which. The MX-13 turned over with a slow reluctance, then caught and settled into a winter idle that made the cab shake like an old dog. I clicked the marker lights on. The world outside accepted them without gratitude. Are you me? I asked the dead plastic. I could be, it said. If I ever hear myself sound like that again, I hope I have more sense than I did. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm the sound your teeth make when the wheel jerks. Sometimes I'm the last thought after the plastic shatters. Tonight I got ahead of you. I sat there with my hands on my knees like a student. The heat reached my fingers and brought them back in stages. Wind touched the cab twice, a double tap like a knuckle on a door. Somewhere in the lot a strap popped as it shed a thin rib of ice. What happens if I go now? I asked. I don't know why I asked. Maybe because when the road makes sense in every direction, you try the one that scares you first to get it out of the way. You don't this time, it said. You didn't. I pictured the curve at 178 like a photograph. I pictured the small lift, the micro steer. The wind catching the box from the right just as the left lane black-iced under the bridge shade. I pictured my hands doing their honest work one moment late. I pictured the gentle siren of a skid turning to the stupid scream of plastic, and then the slowed-down quiet of a box sliding sideways across polished glass and kissing the rail. Numbers gathered behind my eyes, speed, weight, friction, then blew away like snow off a roof. The radio softened, a hand on a shoulder I knew from inside. You think in steps. You want to be told. So listen. Wait until you hear the reefer next door cycle twice. Count your breath to 4, then go. You'll meet your own tracks like they belong to someone else, and that won't be a warning this time. The reefer next row lit. A low drum. It died. Cold filled its place. It lit again, stuttered, smoothed. My breath made 4 clouds and the 4th was smaller. I put her in gear like the first time I ever moved a truck. Respect in every joint. Out of the slot onto the ramp, back to 94. The highway met me like a dog that had been pretending not to miss me. I kept it slow enough to embarrass myself if the wrong man had been listening. He wasn't. The curve at 178 came back a long time later than it should have, as if the road had added miles while I wasn't looking. It lay there like it always does, innocent as a cup of water. The wind had changed a degree. The ice had forgotten to shine. My hands were softer. My eyes were farther. The black glass still lied, but not to me, not that minute. The radio exhaled through its own lungs, no words, just a release. Mandan scale sat dark. A plow swung wide in the median and threw a sparkling sheet that broke into diamonds and never touched me. Bismarck glowed and cooled behind me, then fell off the mirrors. At 0311, a patrol car sat crosswise under an overpass, lights dead, engine plume pencil thin. I rolled by and saw 2 troopers standing by the guardrail staring down into a place where a car had been and was no longer. Maybe a tow had already come. Maybe the river holds its own counsel. I kept my eyes where the lane lives and counted signs like beads. By the time Dickinson's sodium lights showed, the radio had gone back to black. I pulled into a truck stop that smells like fryer oil and wet wool and rain that isn't. Inside, a bulletin board held a picture of a wreck on 94 near mile 178 from 3 winters back. Jackknife tractor, trailer like a folded letter, handprints in the snow where men pushed things that wouldn't move. The staples were rusted. The paper had gone soft at the corners. Someone had written "slow down" under it in a thick marker that bled like a wound. In the morning, I checked the dash cam. Between Jamestown and Bismarck, the audio carried only engine hum and heater whine. At 059, under the curve near 178, there was a sound like someone speaking underwater. It wasn't words. Frame by frame, you could see my hands doing the right things at the right time. The camera doesn't show what a man thinks before he moves. It doesn't show who told him. Some nights since, the prairie goes so quiet it feels cruel. The radio shows me it's dead square, no light, no hope. When the glass road leans under a bridge and the wind gets smart, sometimes I hear my own voice in the dead air where voices don't live. It says the thing I'm about to think and then waits to see if I'm stubborn. When I listen, the ledger stays open, and I get to write another line. If you run that stretch west of Bismarck and the CB is grave quiet until the exact second your hands want instructions, keep them light and look where you mean to go. When the radio tells you what you were already thinking, don't argue with the part of you that came back to say it. Not every warning needs a name.
They call it the Ghost Mile, but on the map it's just pavement like any other. 2 thin lanes rolling north through nothing much. Fence posts and snow fences. Windbreaks of scrub oak that don't break any wind. That week I was hauling a light load out of Duluth to the oil patch. 52 empty drums and a pallet of fittings wrapped in so much plastic it squeaked when the trailer shifted. 2017 Cascadia, DD15, 10-speed manual because winter hates lazy gearboxes. Gross just under 50,000, too light for the ice, too heavy to pretend the wind can't move you. Chains oiled in the side box, triangles behind the seat, LD green, CB on 19, heater core smelling like baked lint and old coffee. The road was MN 73 up to US 53, then west toward the prairie where the land goes flat enough to lose yourself. Locals told me if I hit County 12 before midnight the air would be kind. I don't listen to folk weather, I watch the dash. It was 18 degrees Fahrenheit and falling when I turned off the last town's glow and into a night that sounded like my own tires. The stars had the hard cut of glass. Wind wrote a steady note across the mirror brackets and sometimes rested its hand on the trailer so I'd remember it was still there. Plows had gone through at sundown and left the highway clean but slick. A black ribbon with a dusting of powder that moved sideways when you looked at it. The first mile marker after the county line was 9. The next said 10. Both reflected back my high beams too brightly, like they were closer than they were. Somewhere out there between 12 and 13 is where stories get born. I staged my brain the way I do for bad patches. Loosen hands, eyes far, no heroics with the Jake. Coffee had gone metallic in the thermos. That thin iron taste that says you've been awake past your contract. At 23:41, the ELD blinked the time over a chime that sounded smaller than the cab. The dash thermometer read 12 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 minutes later, the gauge shivered like a living thing and slid to 2 degrees Fahrenheit in a single breath. Not gradual, not honest, just down. Outside, nothing looked different. But the air coming through the imperfect places in the door seal found my knuckles and stole them. The steering wheel felt colder through the glove, as if the metal underneath had lost its memory. I watched the numbers and felt the old part of me, the part that trusts tools, step 1 pace back. I eased to 45 and let a pickup run around me, its taillights bouncing away into the clean dark. The CB had been skip and nonsense for an hour. Here it went dead. Not quiet, dead. Like a speaker unplugged. Sometimes silence is a gift. This was the other kind. Mile 12 slid by on the right, blue sign bright, no frost on it. Between the posts, the cold thickened. Not air you breathe, air you push against. The windshield fogged from the inside as if I'd turned a kettle open in the footwell. I thumbed the defrost. Warm air came hard and honest. The fog climbed away from the vents like a curtain rolling up. Then 5 handprints appeared in the fogged crescent above the passenger wiper arc, clear as if someone inside the cab had laid their fingers there and leaned. Not child prints, not mittens. Adult, wide palms, grease-dark crescents under where nails would be. They pressed and dragged downward through the fog, leaving 5 lines that curved a little, like whoever owned them had been trying to hold, then slid. Every instinct I've got for winter driving orders the same 3 moves. Keep it straight, keep it steady, keep your head. I did all 3. I didn't swat at the glass. I didn't curse. I did look at the seat beside me because a brain is a faithful animal, and when you show it a sign, it wants to match it to a thing. Passenger seat was empty but for an old road atlas with coffee maps wrinkled through Minnesota. My breath made a cloud, and that cloud moved toward the prints like a body drawn to heat. There was no heat. The marks didn't wick. They just were. The road under the tires changed its voice. Black Ice hum has a pitch like a violin string tuned a half-step meaner than the song wants. It came up from the steers and through the wheel and into my elbows the way good warnings do. 40, 38. I kept the Jake on low and off, heel rocking from throttle to nothing the way you rock a baby you don't want to wake. The trailer hip tested the wind and then, almost shy, came home. I told myself things. The heater and my breath, that's all. Condensation makes jokes. The dozen things that can etch oils onto glass, bare fingers, glove treatment, wipes, play games when you change the dew point too fast. I made the case and did not believe it. Mile 13 sign didn't reflect right. My light hit it and slid off like water. A ground fog had risen without having the courtesy to look like a cloud thin, writhing low as a dog's back. The thermometer needle, on a gauge that had never moved faster than a minute hand, snapped flat to 0 as if someone had flicked it. The digital readout next to it showed 3 dashes like a system that had given up telling the truth. They call it the ghost mile, but on the map it's just pavement like any other. 2 thin lanes rolling north through nothing much. Fence posts and snow fences. Windbreaks of scrub oak that don't break any wind. That week I was hauling a light load out of Duluth to the oil patch. 52 empty drums and a pallet of fittings wrapped in so much plastic it squeaked when the trailer shifted. 2017 Cascadia, DD15, 10-speed manual because winter hates lazy gearboxes. Gross just under 50,000, too light for the ice, too heavy to pretend the wind can't move you. Chains oiled in the side box, triangles behind the seat. LD green, CB on 19. Heater core smelling like baked lint and old coffee. The road was MN 73 up to US 53. Then west toward the prairie where the land goes flat enough to lose yourself. Locals told me if I hit County 12 before midnight the air would be kind. I don't listen to folk weather. I watch the dash. It was 18 degrees Fahrenheit and falling when I turned off the last town's glow and into a night that sounded like my own tires. The stars had the hard cut of glass. Wind wrote a steady note across the mirror brackets and sometimes rested its hand on the trailer so I'd remember it was still there. Plows had gone through at sundown and left the highway clean but slick. A black ribbon with a dusting of powder that moved sideways when you looked at it. The first mile marker after the county line was 9. The next said 10. Both reflected back my high beams too brightly, like they were closer than they were. Somewhere out there between 12 and 13 is where stories get born. I staged my brain the way I do for bad patches. Loosen hands, eyes far, no heroics with the Jake. Coffee had gone metallic in the thermos. That thin iron taste that says you've been awake past your contract. At 23:41, the ELD blinked the time over a chime that sounded smaller than the cab. The dash thermometer read 12 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 minutes later, the gauge shivered like a living thing and slid to 2 degrees Fahrenheit in a single breath. Not gradual, not honest, just down. Outside, nothing looked different. But the air coming through the imperfect places in the door seal found my knuckles and stole them. The steering wheel felt colder through the glove, as if the metal underneath had lost its memory. I watched the numbers and felt the old part of me, the part that trusts tools, step 1 pace back. I eased to 45 and let a pickup run around me, its taillights bouncing away into the clean dark. The CB had been skip and nonsense for an hour. Here it went dead. Not quiet, dead. Like a speaker unplugged. Sometimes silence is a gift. This was the other kind. Mile 12 slid by on the right, blue sign bright, no frost on it. Between the posts, the cold thickened. Not air you breathe, air you push against. The windshield fogged from the inside as if I'd turned a kettle open in the footwell. I thumbed the defrost. Warm air came hard and honest. The fog climbed away from the vents like a curtain rolling up. Then 5 handprints appeared in the fogged crescent above the passenger wiper arc, clear as if someone inside the cab had laid their fingers there and leaned. Not child prints, not mittens. Adult, wide palms, grease-dark crescents under where nails would be. They pressed and dragged downward through the fog, leaving 5 lines that curved a little, like whoever owned them had been trying to hold, then slid. Every instinct I've got for winter driving orders the same 3 moves. Keep it straight, keep it steady, keep your head. I did all 3. I didn't swat at the glass. I didn't curse. I did look at the seat beside me because a brain is a faithful animal, and when you show it a sign, it wants to match it to a thing. Passenger seat was empty but for an old road atlas with coffee maps wrinkled through Minnesota. My breath made a cloud, and that cloud moved toward the prints like a body drawn to heat. There was no heat. The marks didn't wick. They just were. The road under the tires changed its voice. Black Ice hum has a pitch like a violin string tuned a half-step meaner than the song wants. It came up from the steers and through the wheel and into my elbows the way good warnings do. 40, 38. I kept the Jake on low and off, heel rocking from throttle to nothing the way you rock a baby you don't want to wake. The trailer hip tested the wind and then, almost shy, came home. I told myself things. The heater and my breath, that's all. Condensation makes jokes. The dozen things that can etch oils onto glass, bare fingers, glove treatment, wipes, play games when you change the dew point too fast. I made the case and did not believe it. Mile 13 sign didn't reflect right. My light hit it and slid off like water. A ground fog had risen without having the courtesy to look like a cloud thin, writhing low as a dog's back. The thermometer needle, on a gauge that had never moved faster than a minute hand, snapped flat to 0 as if someone had flicked it. The digital readout next to it showed 3 dashes like a system that had given up telling the truth.